Relax the body. Let us move through the body once. Relax the two legs. Move your attention through the right leg, left leg. Relax them. Through the stomach, abdomen. Move through the chest, the back, the two shoulders, the two hands. Relax the neck. Release the jawbone.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Yes, okay.
Loosen the jawbone. Relax the chin, the two lips. Relax your teeth, gums, tongue, the two cheeks, the two nostrils, the two ears. The back of the head, the top of the head, the forehead, the two eyes and around the eyes. Move your attention once through the body. If you find tension anywhere, relax it. Now feel a presence within the body, as if the body is there. The body is like a hotel room, but there's something occupying the body. Try to sense it, try to feel it, as if you're occupying a hotel room. Hold that presence. That presence does not have a name. And the more we can hold that presence, the more we will rise in consciousness. Hold the presence for 1 minute with the music. Breathe with the music and hold the presence. I am in the body. I am occupying the body, but I am not the body. Try to come back slowly. Slowly open your eyes. So today we are going to talk about a very simple technique. This is the technique of pause. And if we can master this one technique, then, as Jesus said, the first is the last. This is the one technique which can take us throughout the spiritual journey. So the understanding of it and the application of it in our daily lives. Now, before we go into how to pause, we must try to understand what is an impression. I am looking at you and you are registered in the mind, and then I recognize you. And when I recognize you, between the registration and the recognition, you form an impression on the mind. Each moment we are taking in impressions from all around us, through the five senses, from all around us. Science says that I look at you, you are broken down into photons. Those photons pass through the eye, they come onto the retina, and then the brain recreates the image inside. In actuality, I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at the recreated image inside. But it is that which impresses upon the mind. So the moment something impresses upon the mind, it is called an impression. And we have to follow the journey of that impression, where it came from, how it impresses upon the mind, and what we have to do at that point in time. Now, impressions have been called a kind of food by Gurdjieff. He talks about three kinds of food: the physical food, the food we eat at home, the air food which we breathe, and the impression food. Now, like we said, I look at you and you are broken down into photons. The Shastra, the scriptures say, I look at you and you are broken down into something called tanmatra, matrikas. These are electromagnetic impulses, similar to photons, but the Shastra has a different way of saying it. And those impulses, those electromagnetic impulses, they come through the five senses. They are received by an inner instrument which is called the manas. And the manas recreates your image on the chitta, the screen of the chitta inside. And we know the famous Yoga Sutra saying, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This recreated duplicate of what I'm seeing outside, what I see on the screen of the chitta, is called as vritti. And yoga says that when that vritti is suppressed, you pause that vritti, you suppress that vritti, then the mind is empty, and in that moment of emptiness, only the seer remains, and you experience the seer. Now, we are going to follow this journey, and we want to bring in consciousness. So we say an impulse comes in through the five senses. And when it comes in through the five senses, it meets a memory pattern inside. It meets the memory inside. And there are two kinds of memory: shallow memory and deep memory. And together with memory, the impulse and the manas, the inner instrument, they form what is called a thought form. Not a thought, but thought form. That thought form travels to the forehead, and there it is registered. And once it is registered, it then impresses upon the mind, and I say, okay, this is this person, or whatever the effect it has. Now, at the moment of registration, many things are happening. The first is the instinctive center inside of us. The instinctive brain inside of us is putting a label, comfortable or uncomfortable. And this is programmed by nature. We cannot do anything over here. why is this programming done by nature? Nature does this programming so that it is to make us safe, to keep us to protect life. So if I see a snake on the road, I straight away get a feeling of something uncomfortable inside. I register it, I see a snake, it impresses me, it is danger. And I move away a little and walk from the other side. Now, after the instinctive mechanism has labeled it comfortable, uncomfortable, it goes to the emotional mechanism. And the emotional mechanism labels it as like or dislike. Each moment, our emotional center, their emotional mind, is labeling the moment like and dislike. And this is totally automatic. Now, once it is labeled like and dislike, it goes to the intellectual center where a thought is formed. And I say it in words or language. I don't like this person. I don't want this. I want this, etc., etc. Now, in this whole process, what stages can we bring consciousness in? The highest form of consciousness would be where the impression enters, where the electromagnetic impulses enters. I pause over there and I only allow those to enter which I want to. But that is a very, very high state of consciousness. The second point will be where the emotional center, my emotional mind, labels the impression as like and dislike. This is also very difficult because liking and disliking is happening so fast. So that would be another state of consciousness to come to that liking and disliking. Then it is what you call the impression forms, and from the impression the thought forms. And now there are two kinds of thought over here. One is the thought which has formed, and one is the thought which I think after that. Let's just go into this. I see her, so she impresses upon the mind. I say it is this person. Till then, that is the registration, and the thought has come to me that she has come. But I say, she owes me so much money. So now I'm not, I've proceeded further from the thought which was formed to my thinking. I don't know if I'm coming across this in this way, right? You see the chair impresses upon you, and you say this is a chair, but then you say this chair is not comfortable. So the thought which came, you have now thought the thought. And once we start this thinking the thought, it may lead to a big train of linked thoughts, a chain of linked thoughts. And in this whole process from like to dislike, to the formation of the thought, to thinking the thought, we are not aware, we are not conscious at any point of time. It all happens mechanically. So it's very difficult to bring consciousness at the point of like and dislike. Then we try to bring consciousness at the point where the thought comes to us. And from there, we say, I'm not going to think another thought. But we start thinking the thought because she owes me money, and I'll say that I'm already thinking the thought that I've been asking for so many months and she's not giving it to me, and this is not the right way. And I go into this train of thoughts, totally mechanical. And I may also pause there, bring consciousness there. Suddenly I remember that what am I doing? I wake up and I can pause there. Or the lowest form of pause would be that I now get ready to say something to her, that you're this kind of a person, right? And I say maybe one or two words, and then I suddenly become conscious of what I'm doing, and I pause there. So the first pause is when the impression comes in, which is a very high state of consciousness. The second is when we apply the label of like and dislike, which is also a very high. The third is that the formation of the thought, right? And at the formation of the thought, we say this thought has come to us, but we will not think any other thoughts. But if we start the process of thinking, then the fourth is waking up in the thinking, and the fifth and final pause will be from the thinking I've gone to action, and in the action, that is, I speak something, and in that I wake up in between and I bring the pause there. So these are different levels of pause, and Keita will explain one by one once again, then we'll go ahead, right?
So maybe if we can just, before let's look at an example. Let's look at this image that you see over here. And two questions. First is, what is the first thing that registered in mind when you saw this? Rose, okay. Beautiful, okay. Red rose, okay. Dark background, okay. Flower, okay. So in this line, which in this case is a rose, what would be associations here? What are the emotions that followed when this registered in your mind? Beautiful, lovely, right? There's maybe, so these are all your emotional associations. There might also be intellectual associations. So the color red, the dark background, right? Those are intellectual associations. Maybe if there's some unlucky chap who took this rose and gave it to someone and the girl rejected him, right? That might lead him to a negative association. So the first impression, that is the rose, that is always neutral. It does not have any emotion. It does not have any thought registered to it. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And then there is a series of associations which can take you to the thought and take you to some emotional states which can either be positive or negative. And this is depending on what? These associations, these are dependent on what? Experience, yes. Memory, exactly, right? So this is the memory of the past events in my life that determine what are the associations that the impression will go to.
Should I just explain association in a little different way? One of the quotations I use is that of Vivekanand. And somebody asked Vivekanand, what is an association? So Vivekanand said the rain is falling, and if the rain falls in the gutter, it is associated with the gutter. If the rain is falling on the field, then it is associated with growth of the plant. If the rain is falling and I take a shower in the rain, then it is giving me joy and happiness, right? So the rain is neutral. The impression is neutral. The association is the connection, right? I'm getting joy. It's, the association is taking me to the, what do you call, emotional part of my mind, the emotional center. Now here what we have to realize is, what is the gutter within us? What is the gutter within us? And that is where we react and get negative, right? So supposing he says something and it irritates me, the rain has fallen, right? But where did the rain associate? With the water in the gutter. That is at a lower part of my being, the rain associated, right? Now, if I'm conscious, I say I don't want to take the impression to a lower part of my being. I want to take the impression to a higher part of my being. So, in this, we understand that in the mind, there are thousands and thousands of associations, right? And all those associations have been laid mechanically, right? And they happen all automatically. And those associations have to be observed and recreated.
Now, with this information, let's try to just go through again the journey that that Rajan Bhai had taken us through with some more details and specificity. So let's say the first step, and let's take the image of the rose only that we saw. First is the incoming impulses, which come in via the five. There's a question mark there, you can get into it, but which come in via the five senses. So, what is the impulses that come in when you are talking about the rose? Absolutely, right? So Shabda, Sparsha, Gandha. So for example, these are the Tanmatras. So the Tanmatras are the basic units of each of these five different sense inputs that we have, right? So, and these are all electromagnetic. So, and so for example, we can understand that how sight is electromagnetic because it's literally light waves that are coming to us. But how would the smell be electromagnetic, or how would the touch be electromagnetic? That is chemical. Exactly, exactly. So the senses, which are your nervous system, they translate each of these different. It can be a like if I'm feeling the breeze, it's a mechanical impulse. If I am smelling, it's a chemical impulse. But the nervous system converts all of these into electromagnetic impulses that then travel to the brain. This is the first step. Then after this, what happens is we have within us something that we call as memory patterns. Memory patterns are of two types. Memory patterns are shallow memory patterns that help us recognize a rose as a rose. And there are deep memory patterns, which is more sanskar related memory patterns, which are emotional in nature. And the one way to visualize this is in a machine learning language, right? These are the features that are there in the algorithm that our brain looks for in the incoming data set. So, for example, whenever I saw a rose for the first time, whenever I was a kid, an image of the rose got formed in my head. Okay, rose is associated with red color, this shape, this form. And in the incoming impulses that come, I'm trying to find that feature or form of the rose. And that is what is the role of memory pattern or a feature recognition in all of these incoming impulses. Now, when all of this recognition happens, it creates, which is the incoming impulses along with these memory patterns, they create something that is called as thought forms. Thought forms are still not verbal, but they are just visuals, images, music, those kind of things. 120 get created per second, out of which 16 get registered in the registration area. And our capacity currently, we can only try to comprehend one or two of them, right? So one or two of them come in the limit of our perception. Some people can train themselves and they can get higher also, but 1 to 2 sort of neutral impressions. So this is just a neutral rose impression. There's no color.
But in a state of hypnosis, the hypnotist can extract many thought forms which we registered but were not aware of, right? And that can be possible, right?
So this is the second stage, which is the stage of thought form and a neutral impression, 1 or 2 neutral impressions per second. What you just said, right? When you saw that image, you said it's a rose. It's a neutral impression. There's no association of it being such a beautiful rose, right? A positive emotion, or let's say, that girl, she did not tell yes to me, and the depression. But none of it is there. It's just a neutral impression.
Okay. Go ahead. Or
Should I complete?
yeah.
Okay. Then after this, it goes to the emotional center. We saw, right? The emotional center will, based on memory, either say that I like this. So if you have a good memory of the rose, right, which most people have, it will be a like. If you have a bad memory, then it will be a dislike. So this then becomes the labeled impression. So it has now, it's not just an impression, but it has an emotional state along with it, right? It's either a like or a dislike. And this is where, by the way, we were discussing karma yesterday. This is where karma also starts, because it's emotional and now we've started accruing that karma. It goes forward to the thinking center. Now, thinking center, based on what are the labels that are there, it adds language and it starts a thought. The thought could either be about a memory, where a good memory that we have of a rose. It could be basically you see the dark color in the rose and then you start thinking about something dark, right? It could be some other bad memory, right? But it's a thought which first comes to you. This is just the coming of the thought. After, and the important point here is which thought comes. Multiple thoughts can come, but which comes dependent on the labeled labels that you've associated with it, which are dependent on the memory. And then finally, once that thought comes, we often start thinking the thought. We are not even able to differentiate between a thought coming and we thinking the thought, right? Before we even know, we've started thinking through it. And this is all the self-talk, imagination, daydreaming. Psychologists use multiple ways to explain about this. And then finally, the thought hypnotizes us. We start thinking. Each thought is soaked in emotion. And then before we know it, we started talking about it, acting it. So this is how this entire process happens. And this happens in a jiffy, right? Literally 1 or 2 seconds. And this is the different places where we can pause. And we generally start with, oh shit, what have I done, right? After I've spoken, we start with that. And then we slowly, as we advance, we try to come between the thought, after the thought comes, right? After the impression is formed, and maybe one day, right, we can even have a pause before the impression is formed.
Depending on where we pause at 3, 4, or 5, we are forming future karma at 3.
Absolutely. So, and depending on how far ahead you go in the journey, that's how intense the karma is formed. And there's an emotion that's the emotion, no? And once you go beyond that point, there's always a constant emotion that's sort of happening in the background, right, which sort of contributes to that. Okay, now I'm going to ask a question. What is the function of emotions? What is the real function of emotions? We have done this before. It's 3 years, maybe 4 years, I don't know. Huh? What is the real function of emotions? To see, to perceive, right? Now, emotions have 2 parts. A lower part called affection and a higher part called love. And love is a byproduct of consciousness, not the I love you and you love, not that love, right? Now, what is the difference between affection and love? What is the difference between affection and love? Affection could be the beginning of love. It is the raw material which, when transformed within us, it creates love. It leads to a higher form of emotion, right? So I have affection for my child, but if my child passes the exam, the affection increases. But if he fails in the exam, the affection goes down, right? So what goes up and down, what increases and decreases is not love. Can you understand? I have affection for someone, but if he starts criticizing me, then my affection turns to hate, love turns to hate, right? So, and we see in so many places where love has turned to hate.
So affection is that which is a part of the duality of life. In love, once you love somebody, it cannot change. Right? It is like and love is not individual. I cannot say I love you and I don't love you. Then it is still affection. Love is like an inner lamp which is lit, and the light of love will fall on anyone. But this is not what I want to. Now, this higher stage of love is what allows us a perception of truth. Where do we see the perceiving capacity of emotions? Where do we see the perceiving capacity of emotions? Where do we see it? In a mother, right? A mother has a what you call sensitivity of her child. And even when the child grows up and he's 100 miles away, but if he has a fever, the mother gets a feeling inside, right? That my child has a fever. That means the even 100 miles away, the emotions can perceive. And when we transform affection into love, into a higher emotion, it opens up the perception of what is truth. In our present state of affection, we cannot see truth. Now, as long as the emotional mind is labeling the impression inside as like and dislike, it is so mechanical that we can never transform the affection into love. Now, we talked about associations, and let us take associations in a different way. Let us take them as fixed pathways in the brain, right? Now, what happens if the child fails in the exam? What is the fixed pathway? What is the label first attached? What is the label first attached? Dislike. Dislike, right? Definitely, the emotional mind is not going to attach a label of like. Can you draw this? Now, the minute any impression is attached with a label of dislike, the association automatically takes it to the negative part of our emotional center. You'll have to show this pathway. It automatically takes it to the negative part of the emotional center. What is lying? Yesterday we saw what is lying in the negative part of the emotional center. Irritation, anger, jealousy, comparison, self-love, right? I am right, self-love, egoism, all that is lying in the negative part of the emotional center. So the minute the impression comes inside, the emotional part labels what it calls the association, the pathway in the brain automatically takes it to the negative part of the emotional center. And in any spiritual pursuit, unless this is purified, unless we are free of this negative part of the emotional center, our emotions will remain at a very low level. They will not rise to the level where we can see truth, where we can perceive truth. So we are given the raw material. That raw material has to be transformed into something higher, right? But the first part is getting rid of the whole go down of negativity which we have inside. And that go down always connects to dislike. And where will we see this in the world all around us? Okay, let's put it in another way. What is the cause of violence? Is it dislike? Right. If there's no dislike, can there be violence? That's the end. You're free of violence, right? So we have to work on our dislike, reach that state where the emotional center labels it, and before we can dislike, we want to pause over there. At least we want to in this life reach to that state. So these associations in the brain have been formed in our childhood. They're like grooves in the mind, and automatically the impression goes on that. Now, what will it mean to change the pathway? What does it mean to change the pathway? To create a new pathway in the brain, to create a new, what do you call, road in the mind? What would it mean? What would we have to do? Pause. I'm coming to the pause. What do we have to do? Change the meaning. Change the meaning, right? So now try to understand, because this is very difficult to understand. He insults me, right? So he has said some words. Those words are absolutely neutral. Can you understand? In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjun what is coming through the five senses is just tanmatra, matra sparshastu konteya. What is coming through the five senses is only electromagnetic. Whether he praises me or whether he insults me, both are just electromagnetic impulses which are coming, tanmatra coming in. Can you see? I am labeling inside when he insults as dislike. I am labeling inside like when he praises me. Can you get what I'm trying? What is coming in has not negative, positive, right, wrong, nothing. It's just a form of electromagnetic impulse. But the minute I label it dislike, it goes to the negative part of the emotional center. So I have to change the pathway. And what does it mean to change the pathway? Change the meaning. Because when it goes to the negative part of the emotional center, the thought comes that he has insulted me. I have defined what he says as an insult.
One difference I see here between the analogy of the rose, for example, or somebody saying something to you. So when the rose, So the impression that the rose creates, right, is fairly neutral, right? And it's only after that you create an association. If you had rejection, let's say when you create a rose for your girlfriend or whatever. Whereas when somebody says something to you, it's not neutral because it's language which has to be interpreted. So in one sense, though it's the input is the same, the impression of the rose, here it's the impression of the words. Unfortunately, the impression of the words is not as neutral as the rose itself, because the words are already interpreted.
There's a fixed pathway which takes it. This is called an insult.
Right. So how, in other words, how do you intervene?
Yeah. So you bring consciousness there, and supposing you bring understanding. What is hurt within me? What is hurt within me?
But what happens, unfortunately, is when somebody speaks words, it's interpreted automatically, right? I mean, how do you interpret?
So we've come to that. We've not brought consciousness to that stage of automatic. What do I do? Supposing I bring the understanding, who is hurt?
Oh, this happens after.
It's always the ego which is hurt, right? And now the ego is sitting silently somewhere. You insult me, does the ego now appear or does it disappear? It comes out. So I can change the meaning of insult of the ego. I become conscious of the ego. So I'm now the same words are going, I'm creating a new pathway for those words. They don't lead to the negative part of the emotional center. I don't know if you're getting it.
Not quite yet. Not quite yet.
Yeah.
So there is something called pre-conscious bias. So for example,
That is called as sanskar.
Correct.
That is called as sanskar, memory pattern.
Based on the past experiences, and if that impression stays in the mind.
So the impulse has come in, it has met sanskar. It is making a thought form. There is a labeling of like and dislike, and then the thought comes, I don't like this guy. Right?
And that's why all this ego and insult. And
so that is why we put the pause at 5 different places to bring consciousness at 5 different places. I can even react to you in 2-3 words and suddenly become conscious, right? Or when the words are coming up here, I can become conscious. Can you get it? Or at the moment where the thought forms that this is what he has done, I don't allow my monkey to talk further. I can become conscious over there. And then if I'm lucky, little higher, I become conscious where I label it as dislike, right? So these are all different stages. So we're going to take pause in all these stages, right? Now, pause means to stop internally, to stop in the mind. And when we were children in school, we played what was called a statue, right? And the game was that somebody would say statue and you become statue. You can't lift your leg or do it. You can't make yourself comfortable, right? And when we are in a state of statue, all the other people who are in the game, they will come and somebody will do this and somebody will do something else, to break us. Because the minute we start laughing, the statue has gone. This is very similar, very, very similar. Now I become aware at that point that he has insulted me. So I statue at that point. I don't allow my thinking to go further. I statue in the mind and I say, he has insulted me. I can even repeat it like a mantra as a mala. He has insulted me, but I don't allow my thought to go further. If it goes further, I'll say, he's doing this every day. He's doing it to so many other people, right? I better give him a piece of my mind today. He needs it, he deserves it, etc., etc. So then the thought which came, which was formed, the first thought, it came to me. All the other thoughts, I have thought those thoughts. So here, the first consciousness over here is between having a thought and thinking a thought. And this is going to take time. It will take a lot of practice. But here, I pause over there. He has insulted me. Now, what will happen in this state? Other thoughts will come in the mind. That he does it every day, but I just pause. I say, so like my friends in school, somebody did this, somebody did that, somebody laughed, right? The same way, so many thoughts will come. Okay, he's this kind of a person, he is this, he is that, right? And I don't, pay attention to those thoughts. I just stand with the last thought that he insulted me. And this is the basis of statue in the mind, basis of pause in the mind, right? Now, can we see that at this point, if that had gone further, I would have reacted to it. And the minute we react, the pattern of reaction, the sanskar of reaction becomes more powerful. We fall deeper into the identification, the sleep of life. So when we are motionless, thoughts will come and go. They will pass. They will try to speak to us. They will tell us how foolish we are, right? And try to make us pay attention to them. And we don't pay attention. I still remain with the last thought. He has insulted me. I don't let it go further. So pause is not stopping of thoughts, right? Pause is statue with the last thought and allowing the other thoughts to pass by without getting attached to them. Now, it is like this, that I'm sitting in my home and I come out of my home and I'm standing on the door and there are so many passers-by and I just look at the passers-by. But the minute I call one of the passers-by inside, then I have identified with that thought. Can you see? So as long as they're passing by, that's okay. Then I've got identified. I don't pay attention at all. I don't say pay attention at all to the thoughts inside.
સામેવાળી વ્યક્તિ મને રિએક્ટ ના કરે તો પાછો મને વિચાર આવે કે આ મારી સામે નથી જોતો એવું બી થઈ શકે.
This is all happening inside. This is all happening inside, and you'll have to pass through this process. Once you get a little expertise in this process, then you can respond to him in a different way. You can respond to him in a different way, but initially you'll have to pass through it, where somebody will feel you are not reacting, and then you can react like you play a game or something, but don't have to bring negativity into your reaction. So the whole thing is to bring a kind of intelligence into the reaction. Now, the mind is like a jungle. Mind is like a jungle. And then this should answer your question. In the jungle, if you move, you're gone. Animals, they don't have the same kind of eyes that man has. Man sees color, form, etc. Animals see movement. Right? So if you're still in the jungle, nothing is going to happen. But the minute you're frightened and you move, the lion will pounce upon you. Right? Similarly, in the jungle of the mind, right? You hold a thought, you're still with that thought, then no thoughts can affect you. But the minute you say hi to the thought, right? It's gone, there's movement, and you're going to be killed and eaten up in the mind. Right? Then you've got identified with that thought process. So start with small reactions. You may go in a room, you see somebody laughing and you feel he's laughing upon you, right? Just pause over there. Don't let it go further, right? You can, you go to somebody's house and you see, what do you call, a very nice TV set or something, and the thoughts just pause over there, right? Beautiful TV, right? Just pause at the last thought. Maybe we go in a room of people and we see nobody's paying attention to us. Again, just pause over there, stop over there, right? Because something in us is asking that, please talk about me, right? And that is the, what do you call, the ego, which is asking, and we have to look at it. Don't give it food to eat. So wherever we pause is an intervention of consciousness. This is the beginning of conscious living, bringing consciousness in our life, right? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Patanjali's sutras on the pause. Patanjali's sutras on the pause, and we are going to talk about them, right? So the first one he'll bring up. The first one is Vyuthana Nirodha Sanskaryo Abhibhava Pradurbhava Nirodha Kshana Chitta Anvyaha Nirodha Parinama. This is the first sutra, right? And this is in book 3 from 9, 10, 11, 12. We are going to take 4 sutras, right? So what Patanjali is saying, that the mind has a tendency to react. The mind has a tendency to react, and we keep on reacting all 24 hours. So this tendency to react is called Vyutthana. Vyutthana, the tendency to react, right? So he's saying Vyutthana Nirodh. Nirodh is pause, to stop, pause, right? Sanskar, the habit of the mind, is Vyutthana, right? And he's saying the Nirodha Sanskar, Abhibhava Pradurbhava. Abhibhava is like the sun setting. So he's saying as we practice this pause, as we bring a pause in our life, the mind's thousands of years old habit of reacting to everything, which is called Vyutthana, that is Abhibhava, that sanskar is setting. It is disappearing. It is disappearing. And the sanskar of Nirodh is rising. It is appearing. So he's saying Vyuthana Nirodha Sanskara Sanskaryoho Abhibhava Pradurbhava. Right? One is setting and one is rising. And this is happening as we practice the pause. As we practice the pause. So by just being still, and this can start even from I say two words to him, right? I call him a couple of names and suddenly I get, and I pause over there and I statue over there. So I can start from there also. Then he's saying, Nirodha Kshana, in that moment of pause, Chitta Anvyaha. Anvya means to join to. If you can join your chitta to the pause, to the statue, right? Then there is a transformation in the mind which is called as Nirodha Parinam. Parinam means transformation. The mind has transformed from reaction to its tendency to react to a new habit, a consciously created habit of pausing. Is this clear to everyone? Very, right? Thousands of years old, but the science is still the same.
So, one question I have. When he's talking about joining, right? The mind to the
Pause.
Right. So where is the pause happening? The pause also
Is happening in the
mind,
mind, and we are attaching the mind to the pause, holding on to the last thought.
Okay.
You get it? We are holding on to the last thought. The last thought could be anything, right? A stone may be there and it hurts my leg. It hurt my leg, right? And I don't say the gardener is very careless. He should have put the. Then I'm gone. Can you get what I'm trying to say, right? So it just we do statue with the last this thing. Now I'm going to take the translation of my guru, Mr. Tavaria over here. The mind, the sequence of mental states is as follows. The mind reacts to that which is seen. Then follows a moment of mind control. Right? The mind control is what? The pause. The mind control is the pause. Now he has not directly taken Patanjali here, and he's speaking out of experience. Then ensues a moment wherein the mind responds to both these factors. Now what will happen? What will happen? Because Patanjali has just said that you attach your mind to the pause. But my teacher is saying the mind will respond to both. That is, again, thoughts will come and try to pull me away and say, give it back to him. Can you see? Thoughts will come and say, give it back to him. At least this time, next time I'll pause, right? Give it back to him this time, right? So, and again, so there'll be a kind of tug of war in the mind. It's not something which is going to happen overnight. There'll be a kind of tug of war. Then again, my aim in life is not to what you call react, to be free of reaction. Let me come back. So there'll be this where the mind will be responding to both the factors. What one factor is him insulting me, and one inside where I have an understanding that I want to be free of reaction, and I try to pause over there. And this pause will be so alive because I'll keep on moving between these two. And he says, there comes a moment. So he has not translated this chitta anvya, the joining of the chitta, as the chitta responds to both the factors. Finally, these pass away. Now, this is the state in the mind after some time when any negative thought does not get food, does not get nourishment, or any thought which comes, and I don't think that thought, right? I say that she owes me money, okay. But I say, no, she is like this, then I'm thinking the thought. If I pause over there, after some time, those thoughts will vanish. Those thoughts will vanish. And Nirodha Parinam, he has transformed, what do you call, that the perceiving consciousness has full sway. The whole effort is to have a glimpse of the perceiving consciousness. The whole effort is to have a sensitivity of the seer inside. right? So he's saying first the reaction comes, then I pause the reaction. Then there is a time in between where the reaction will pull me and I'll pull back. Again, the reaction will pull me. I'll pull back. The mind is responding to both these things. And then a moment will come where everything will go away. The mind will be empty for a moment. And in that emptiness, there'll just be the seeing consciousness. And I will get a, what do you call, sensitivity of that seeing consciousness. I'll get a glimpse of that perceiving consciousness. And that glimpse will transform the mind, right? I'll realize that now this is something which I have to practice much more, right? I've tasted a little blood, that will transform the mind. And I will now practice the pause with much more enthusiasm and passion, right? So then the perceiving consciousness has full sway, what he says over there. So this is the first sutra where he talks about the pause, Patanjali. We take the second sutra, that is Sutra 10.3. Tasya prashanta vahita sanskarat. Now, as initially I have to keep practicing the pause. Then I replace the old habit of reacting by a new habit of pausing. So what has it become, sir? Tell me, what has it become? From the effort in doing it, now it is becoming habit. So it's becoming effort less. So what will you call it? What will you call it? It is becoming, come on, you said it yesterday. Spontaneous. It is becoming spontaneous. The pause now is coming automatic, but it's not fully automatic because you have consciously created this habit, right? So he's saying now that sanskar of pause, the new sanskar of pause, the new sanskar of stopping in the mind, right? It is flowing like a calm river. Tasya prashant. Vahita means flow. Tasya prashant. Prashant means calm. It is flowing like a calm river. Now it has become so, what do you call it? It's become a new habit, a conscious habit. Yeah.
So, does that mean that developing this good sanskar will get rid of or will reduce the other sanskar that we have been carrying since ages?
Yeah. So now we replace a old habit, mechanical habit, with a conscious habit. Right? And we cannot get rid of old habits without replacing them with the conscious habit. The empty space won't remain in the brain. That has to be filled in.
This is the same thing as 3 monkeys. Don't listen, don't talk, don't see.
Yeah, that is statue. That is statue.
Then automatically comes.
Statue. That is statue. You understood or not? I think you're still confused. That's
No,
all.
I understood, but I'm thinking that every human being has a different kind of sanskar, and this is the common good sanskar which we learn.
What is common in all the sanskars? They react. The deepest sanskar is the sanskar of reaction, to react, right? Now we have changed that with a sanskar of pause before reaction. And now this pause is coming automatically, right? Automatically, will not say mechanically. First it was mechanical, the reaction. But where there's no reaction, there is a response, and that is not automatic in the sense of mechanical, but it is automatic in the sense of spontaneous. Right? Now, what he's saying over here, this is again my guru's translation. And he has said, through the cultivation of this habit of the chitta to pause, there will eventually occur a steadiness of spiritual perception. So Prashanta Vaheta, he is translating as spiritual perception. What could he mean by spiritual perception? What could he mean by spiritual perception? Perception, seeing. So supposing somebody is very beautiful, right? And maybe, in my young days, I'm attracted to her or whatever. And after 5 days, I'll see that, oh, in small things she reacts everywhere. She's always irritated. She's always conscious of how good she looks, right? And emphasizing that. So what will I say? What will I say? What will I say? A beautiful form, beautiful body with an ugly psychology, right? A beautiful body with an ugly psychology, right? Now, supposing I got married, so beautiful a girl, better to get married, right? And then what will happen? I'll be suffering the rest of my life. So, when you develop a perception which goes beyond the form, right? That is the beginning of spiritual perception. Where did we talk about it yesterday? Where did we talk about it yesterday? Yesterday I said, my normal perception is he made me angry. He made me angry. But once spiritual perception comes, I realize that anger was already lying within me. He just allowed it to come out. Can you see this? Now, what would spiritual perception mean in the form of complaining? Supposing yesterday we said that all the events of our life are attracted by our sanskars, right? And I complain that my mother-in-law is like this. But if there's spiritual perception, I'll say, I have attracted this in my life. There's no complaining about it. What else will change in my life with spiritual perception? If I am responsible for each moment in my life, is it ever anybody else's fault? You never blame anybody. You never blame anybody. Can you get it? So he's saying that once this pause is practiced, and as this pause becomes more and more spontaneous, it is flowing like a river, but he's saying that river is the what he call beginning of spiritual perception. Now, okay, I'll talk about this tomorrow, our being, but let us just say that a person has a kind of spectrum, right? And now that is called my being, my inner Hoapadu, my being. So you say, can you give me this? And I say, hey, take it. So am I at a lower place in my spectrum, or am I in a higher place in my spectrum? I'm in a lower place. I've reacted. Can you get what I'm trying to say? Now, supposing you say, can you give me this? I say, sure, please take it. Am I at a higher place in my spectrum or in a lower place? I've risen higher, right? So everybody in their own level of consciousness has their center of gravity somewhere, either lower, middle, higher. So when you have spiritual perception, you see the person, but you can see where his center of gravity is.
Isn't it depend who is asking it? I mean, if your boss will ask it, then you say sure, or if you don't like somebody, then say, hey, get it. No,
exactly. But dislike takes us to a lower part of our spectrum. You don't like somebody, right? But even if you dislike your boss, you'll say it outside, but the emotional state is inside. The emotional state is inside, dislike. The emotional state is inside.
I can see one exception to this one. I mean, I understand what this is saying, that most of the time, actually, we are reacting to external stimulus and internalizing it and personalizing it and making it personal and so on. But there is one situation where there is abuse by somebody else.
Yeah, those are extreme situations.
No, the problem is that if you misapply it, the situation, for example, you said, oh, if you might quite often think that you're attracting that event, even though you didn't have anything to do with it. Maybe the other person is abusive. It happens in many cases in spousal abuse, whenever there's somebody in a position of power, whether it's boss and employee, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, then that can lead to your acceptance of the situation, which is actually not your fault, right? Can it not?
Okay. What do we see with our senses, five senses? Do we see effects or do we see causes? We see effects. Causes lie on a different dimension. Causes have to be known through the mind. Can you get what I'm trying to say? Right? Say if I'm watching a detective serial, there is a murdered person, dead body. So that is the effect. But if a good detective will, from that go to the cause, and there'll be multiple causes behind one effect. So in this drama of life, effects lie on one plane, physical plane, but causes lie at a different higher plane. Spiritual perception means you are able to now see the cause. Now, let me give you one example. This is quite a few years ago. I've repeated this example many times, but it will answer your question. I hope it does. Once there was this person in our group, and he used to, at that time I was staying in Bombay, so he would come every 3 months with a new girlfriend and say, I want to marry her. And then I'd say, we'll wait a week and then decide. By the week, he has changed his mind, and then he'll come with somebody else. And once he came with a girl, and I saw that there was something different in her aura, in her eyes and all that. So I told him that you leave me alone with her, you go for a walk. Then when she was with me alone, I said that you're little 1 or 2 years older than this person. And just tell me your story. So she said that when I was 22, I was, arranged marriage, married to someone. And that person was abusing me left, right, and center, physical violence and everything. So I didn't know what to do. After 6 months, I came back to my father's home. My father said, in our tradition, once you're married, you have to be there. You are not allowed to come back home. You go back. You have to go through it, whatever it is. So she didn't know what to do. She jumped out of the 6th floor balcony. Right? And she survived. And over 1 year, she went through so many operations, and she was many times in the hospital in deep pain. And in the sensitivity of deep pain, sometimes the thoughts stop and something higher comes in the mind. And she saw in that inner vision that her husband was not hitting her. She had invited her husband to hit her. And she saw all those causes there. Can you get what I'm trying to say? So at that moment, everything in life just became like full of light, right? There was no complaining about anything in life. Everything was over. And I said, you'll marry this person. This person gets angry every 5 minutes. So he said, no, but for me, he's just a young child, right? And it doesn't make any difference. So what I'm trying to say is that in certain states, you rise to the level of causes. And there is a steadiness of spiritual perception, steadiness of it. So then you ask yourself, what was it in me that invited violence in my life, right? And you will see something inside, that you're holding something deep down in the subconscious or unconscious, which is in a way responsible. I won't say it is 100% responsible. There are many other causes, but it has a big part to play in this. I don't know if I've answered your question here. In a way. So we'll take the next sutra. Sarvartata ekagrata ekagratayoho shaya udaya chittasya samadhi parinam. Okay, so the first transformation he talked about, which one? Which one did he talk about? Which parinam? Nirodh parinam, the pause. Now he's saying as that goes further, it transforms into the transformation of samadhi, right? So what he's saying, how does this come about? Sarvarthatha. Sarvarthatha is a state of fragmentation. Our attention is a fragmented attention. We can't hold our attention on one thing even for a single few more than a few seconds. It always diverts to something else. So our attention is fragmented. It goes all over the place. That is the state of sarvarthatha. Then as you practice the pause, now the pause has become a habit. As the spiritual perception increases, our attention will slowly come into one-pointed attention from a fragmented attention. It is like we have sharpened the knife of attention and it will become one-pointed attention. So he's saying sarvarthatha kshaya ekagrata udaya. Just read it this way. Sarvarthatha ekagrata shaya udaya. Sarvarthatha shaya ekagrata udaya chittasya samadhi parinam. Chittasya samadhi parinam. Now, in all of us, somewhere deep down within us, there is a center which is in total silence. Nothing from the outside world can affect that center. And when the attention becomes one-pointed and we put our attention, then we experience that state of total samadhi, total silence inside, which he says, chittasya samadhi parinam. Now, there is the activities of outer life. Somebody in outer life may be very ill, right? We are very worried because that person is very close to us. But here when we go into that one-pointed state inside, nothing can touch us there. And we realize in this drama of life, somebody has to be healthy, somebody has to be sick, and it's a part of the drama of life. That understanding comes. So he's saying that the fragmentation of the chitta through fragmented attention, and we can experience this when we go to a store, that we want to buy this, then we want to buy this, and then we want to buy this. I experience it every time I take my daughter shopping, right? First she wants to buy this, then she wants to buy this, then she'll say, no, this, right? Just yesterday, she's saying, I'm going to change my courses in college. Right now, I want to do these courses together with this, etc. So our attention is always going all over the place. It is not a one-pointed attention. And please, for that, do practice the prism exercise to bring about one-pointed attention. So he's saying, once attention is one-pointed, we can penetrate that inner point where everything is totally in silence. And once our attention experiences that point, then there's a transformation in the mind. And that transformation in the mind is that, it is called Samadhi Parinam, the Samadhi transformation. And that brings us to a state where at one point we are totally at peace with ourselves. Nothing can disturb it. And other part, we see life with its ups and downs of pain and pleasure and everything going on. The famous, Bhakti Kavi, what was her name? I've forgotten. Meru re dage jeno man, Ganga Sati. She says, Meru re dage jeno man na dage. Right? Meru means the backbone. Meru means the Meru mountain. If the whole earth has an earthquake, but my mind will not, move an inch. It won't falter an inch. She's sitting in that silent area within, which is there in all of our brains. She has penetrated that silent area and she's sitting over there. The whole world can go blast in an earthquake. So nothing is going to happen to me in that area. That is the Samadhi Parinam. Right? The establishing of this habit. Now, again, I'll go back to my guru because my guru used to translate the sutras in a different way. The establishing of this habit and the restraining of the mind, calming the monkey inside thinking instrument from its thought form making tendency. What is the difference between a thought and thought form?
Thought comes based on our past sanskar, and we feed it with our energy.
No. A thought is always in language. Our inner monkey is always chattering in a language. Now, supposing we say that the impulses come in through the five senses and they meet memory patterns over here, and out of that a thought form is made. A thought form. This is more like a picture. It could be a symbol. You see, all yantras are based on thought form. Right? So a thought form is made. And the beauty of this thought form is that it has no language. So it could be a more universal kind of language. If I get a thought of excitement and some Adivasi gets a thought of excitement, then the thought form could be very similar. It doesn't have to be exactly the same because again, it has to pass through his patterns, but it will have something very similar in it. That thought form travels here and it is registered when the impression is made. The registering of the impression is made. At the time of the impression, when the thought is formed, the thought is always in language. The thought is always in language. So now he's not talking about thoughts over here. When I paused first, I paused the language. Can you see? I paused the language. I said, I don't want to give it back to him, but it's going on inside of me. But I'm holding it over there. I'm trying to statue over there. It is still in language over there. Now he's saying you have gone so deep that now you restrain the thought form making tendency. The mind has a habit of making thought forms. And where do we see this? Where do we see this? This habit of making thought forms, not language. Where do we see it? Every night? In dreams. In dreams. And you see, in dreams we see thought form, right? It could be my own anger, but it may come like some dragon in front of me, right? So the dream symbology says something, right? So, and of course, science can only access those dreams in which there is rapid eye movement. Once we go into deeper sleep below rapid eye movement, science cannot access. They say there is a no dream state, which science says, which Shastra says, no, there's dreams right down to coming to this level where this is also a dream, right? So Shastra talks about different levels of dreams, but maybe we can go into that one day, right? So what he's saying is that now you have gone so deep inside that you pause the thought, but now you're restraining the mind, which has a thousands of years a habit of creating thought forms. Even when we are sleeping, it creates thought forms. Now you're restraining that mind from creating those thought forms. What will this do to our sleep? What will this do to our sleep? Today only somebody sent me scientist thing that you must sleep for 8 hours, etc., etc.
Make it less restless. Make it more peaceful because there's fewer thought forms.
Exactly. So what will we call it? There is a difference between sleep and rest. There's a difference between sleep and rest. Many people can sleep 8 hours, but they can get up tired. And many people can sleep for 3 hours and extract 8 hours of rest from that 3 hours of sleep. Can you understand? So when the thought form making tendency of the mind, the habit of the mind to create thought forms, which have not yet become thought, not language, that goes down, then we automatically fall into a very deep level of sleep where the thought forms are very less. And we are able to, in less sleep, to extract more rest, right? And then, of course, Krishna says in the Gita, the yogi does not sleep, he is awake throughout the night. The thought form to this thing has stopped over there. So he can just touch that place and get the rest which he's talking about. So he's saying the establishing of this habit of restraining the mind from its thought form making tendency, eventually resulting in the constant power to contemplate. Now, we take a very low view of contemplation. The best example of contemplation is the writing of the Mahabharata, right? So, Vyas Muni was in a state of contemplation. And when he contemplates on the absolute, the Mahabharata flowed through him. He did not create the Mahabharata, right? It was Shruti. He heard it, he saw it, and it came, it sort of flowed through him, right? And what do you call, Ganesh was the moving center who has to write it, right? So the flowing of that higher thing, that is because it is now you have, by restraining the thought forms, we have now got the power to contemplate, to understand the laws of the higher, to understand how the higher works, how truth appears, what laws govern truth. And this he calls this he calls as Samadhi Parinam. Samadhi Parinam. The last sutra we take, Sutra 11. Tata, you've forgotten the T. You forgotten the T. Tata Puna. Shanta Udito. Chitta Tulya Pratyaya Chittasya Ekagrata Parinam. Now the transformation of one-pointedness, Ekagrata Parinam, the transformation of one-pointedness. Now, here, this is the state of inner balance. Now, in the sutra before this, we had a place up here in our, what do you call, geography of the mind, where if attention penetrates that place, we are in a state of silence, pure silence, nothing touches that state. But can we achieve that state in normal living? No need to even go there. No need to even go there, just in my normal living. So here saying Tata Puna, once again. Tata Puna, once again. Right? That is, what did he say in the first sutra? Right? Vyuthana Nirodha. So he's saying the sanskar of Vyuthan is what do you call, sunsetting, and the sanskar of Nirodha is the rising thing. So he's saying between this setting and rising, so one impression is coming in the mind, right? And that impression is going out and another impression is coming in the mind. One impression is setting and one impression is rising, right? Somebody phone calls, my son has failed in the exam. That is one impression has come in, right? And then somebody phone calls that, what do you call, there was a mistake in the, what do you call, reading this thing. He has passed in the exam. Another impression has come. So that impression sets and this impression rises. So you say, Tata Puna, Shanta Udito. Something is becoming Shant, something is becoming calm, and something is rising, Udita. One impression is Tulya Pratyaya. But between this, there is total balance. Between this, whether he failed or whether he passed, there is total balance. Now, there's a famous, what do you call, Taoist story of the Taoist master called Le Tzu. And Leithaju one day went fishing, and he put a what do you call worm on the hook, and he threw it into the water. And the fish came and caught the worm. He says, "Let it eat it properly, then I'll pull it out." They ate the worm and went away. And then he pulled the thing. So he says to himself, "Too slow." Then he again puts another worm, sends it inside, and the fish comes and he pulls it immediately, and the fish takes the worm and goes away. It says too fast. Then the third time he attaches the worm and he throws it in the pool, and the fish comes and the fish pulls a little, and he pulls only in that much amount that the fish pulls. Then the fish pulls a little. He pulls only in that much amount. He's balancing. Tulya pratyay. Can you understand what I'm saying? And at one point, the fish was caught. That day, he's very happy. He goes back to his disciples and he says, "Today, I've learned a great lesson in life. That in life, there are two forces pulling, and there must be one force which has the intelligence to balance both the forces. To balance both the forces. And this is Tao," he tells them. And this is the Tao. So what he's saying, there is one impression which is what you call going, one impression which is coming, but between them to achieve balance. Now we can take this in another way. We can take this in another way, that between two impressions, the impression of the phone call that he failed and the phone call that he passed, there is a gap. But the mind is moving so fast, we never are able to hold our attention in that gap. Now, in every activity of life, right, I'm meeting somebody, he is getting angry. Angry, there is no gap. But if I'm calm, then between his anger and my calmness, there is a gap. And if I can put my attention in that gap, then I experience the same thing in the third sutra, which I had to put it in the, what do you call, silent area of the brain. That same stillness I experience in the gap. And if this can be done in every activity in life, then I'm living meditation. Each moment of life, I'm not bothered about what is rising, what is falling. I'm in the in-between, and in that I'm experiencing that gap, and I'm in that state of silence all the time. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? This is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, because we can look at it in a different way. Shanta udito tulya pratyay. So one is going down, one is rising, and this tulya pratyay. To whom is this happening inside? To the seer inside. To whom is it happening? Now, he failed in the exam. The seer got identified with that, right? So the seer and the failing in the exam became one. The object and the what you call the perceiver of the object was one. He passed in the exam, very happy. Again, the seer became one. Now he's reached a state where he says one impression of sadness, one impression of happiness, one impression of pain, one impression of pleasure. But what is the impression of the seer inside? And all these impressions, the seer is always balanced. It is always the same impression. In happiness, he does not become happy. In sadness, he does not become sad. So he says that is the transformation of one-pointedness. Either he is in the gap between two impressions, or he is experiencing the seer inside, and the seer inside is eternal. He never changes. Just the impressions of life keep on coming and going. And he says, Tulya pratyay chittasya ekagrata parinam. That is the transformation of one-pointedness. And this is the final. Now, again, we just go back to my teacher's translation. When mind control and controlling factor are equally balanced, right? So he insulted me. What is that? That we will call as the controlling factor. I paused inside, mind control. Now try to understand this. If I'm too passionate about the mind control, right, then it's going to bring more tension, more what do you call muscle tension. Then I'm not, instead of pausing, I am creating more tension somewhere else. So I have to see what is the intensity of his this thing insult, and at that moment I bring only that much. When mind control and the controlling factor are equally balanced, it is like this, that I want to put a nail in this, right? So I need a small hammer to put the nail. But supposing I take a big hammer and put the nail, then it's not needed over. I'm going to smash the bottle, right? So in each moment of life, the mind has to control something, and there is something which is pulling the mind, and the balance is between the two pulls, and to be remain, what do you call, in that balance between the two pulls, when mind control and the controlling factor are equally balanced, only that much of control, then comes the condition of one-pointedness, the transformation which he calls as ekagrata parinam, one-pointedness. So he went to three parinams. The first was nirodha parinam, the application of the pause. Then the pause became spontaneous. It led to a state of inner silence, samadhi parinam. And then in normal life, we can experience that silence at every moment. And that is, to bring it in balance is an art, to bring it in balance, right? So when we are doing this in normal life, it will be more like a tightrope walker. Now, to understand a tightrope walker, we must understand when we are using a pendulum, the middle of the pendulum is fixed because that is a mechanical contraption. But in life, the middle is never fixed. So here the tightrope walker goes on this side, then he comes back to the middle. Controlling factor, mind control, equally balanced. But the next time, if he goes very far, then the middle factor could be somewhere else. Can you see? Each moment, the balance, the point of balance is changing. Each moment, the point of balance is changing. But if he learns how to walk the tightrope, then he walks from this world to the next world. And that is how we experience this, right? So I'll stop over here. We still have some time if somebody wants to. You want to take those few reactions?
No questions. If you could please ask in the mic. Can some please pass the mic to Shri.
So my one question is, this is, when you are attacked by one kind of an emotion, but when in a moment of time, there could be so many different emotions that are like, it could be, how do you bring that pause when there are so many, not one at a time that you can think, you can practice this. Basically, I'm asking about tools that you can practice this.
So first we have to ask a question to ourselves. Is the brain spatial or is the brain digital? It's always digital. So it is one after the other. We may feel that all are coming together, but it is one after the other. Because in the end, the mind has to express itself through the instrument of the brain. And the brain is what you call, in our present case, it is digital. One thought follows another thought, right? A time comes when we can open areas in the brain which are spatial. We see something like a panorama. But that is, as you rise in consciousness, you say you climb the mountain, then you see the car going on the road, you know what is the past of the car, you know what is the present of the car, you know the future of the car. So that is rising in consciousness. Suddenly you see so many things together. But when I'm on the ground, I can only see where the car is now. Can you get it? So as we rise in consciousness, then the brain accommodates that consciousness by opening up new areas in the brain where we can see things. So we feel all emotions have come together, but they are always one after the. Thought has an ayu, a lifespan. And if you hold it for that lifespan, it will vanish. Can you get? And then what remains is that empty space and just the seer inside. So
So when somebody is insulting us and we are not reacting, we are pausing, we are not responding anything, it might come across as a silent treatment. Then how we should react to that?
I think somebody asked the same question. First of all, what is our aim in life? To be free of reaction. This is our first aim. And this is going to take many years of practice. We cannot be free of reaction overnight. So at that time, first thing we do is we remember our aim. Right? And then we don't react to the situation. We bring consciousness to the situation. And we can tell him something after 2-3 minutes. And we can say it maybe in a softer way, where he understands it. But if you react to the situation, it will never, he's never going to understand. Can you get what I'm trying to say? So our aim is to be free of reaction.
But what if we are not getting anything like 2-3 days or for a week, no communication? Then
With whom?
it I
You can speak in Gujarati also.
Okay.
Ah.
So I fight with my friend and I don't get any reactions like for week, then it cause more anger, like for my side, like why there is no reaction or why there is no response.
Were you there in the exercise session on Sunday? We did those exercises, attentive tension and relaxation, right? So now my friend is not talking to me, there is tension inside. Hold that tension. Statue with that tension. Feel that tension. Your point will come where you will digest this tension. Right? If the friend has to talk to you, he's going to come back, or he or she is going to come back to you and talk to you. Don't worry about that. But your aim is that this tension has come in your life. There is a state higher than that tension. Can I rise to that state by using this? If it had not come, you would not be able to use it. Okay? So every sword has two sides, right? Try to see the other side. Try to see the other side. Always remember, our aim is to rise in consciousness. The minute I react, I've fallen in consciousness. Then everything is over. Everything is over. And one of the techniques is you can top it up. If he insults me and he says, you're a stupid fool, you're an idiot, I can easily say, yeah, my wife also says I'm an idiot. You know, you can top it up. Right? So there you don't have to react. And it gives you some time to pause. And when you top it up, then everything, then it goes away. Then there's no intensity left in his insult. Can you get what I'm saying? So one of the techniques you can use is always top it up. Salad dressing. Right?
This concept of suppressed emotions being banned. So, how does it translate? What is suppressed emotion?
See, when it is mechanical, there's suppression. He is my boss. Now I have to suppress the emotion. Right? But here I'm consciously, behind this, there's a consciousness. I'm holding the emotion. I'm holding the thought. So the source of both is different. This is conscious effort. You understand what I'm trying to say? And that is a total mechanical thing which is happening, suppression. Right? Then initially there may be a little bit of suppression. But the minute you do your exercises in the morning, that will go away. Right? But you want to come to a state where you don't express the reaction on him, and then you don't express on him in the mind also. Then there's no suppression. There's no suppression. But if I don't express it on him and then I'm holding it in my mind the whole day, I should have told him, and then I'm suppressing it. I'm repeating it. Right? Every time Okay, what is the meaning of the word sanskar? What is the meaning of the word sanskar? My teacher has translated it as memory pattern, but how will we experience it? What do we mean by the word sanskar? Huh? Yes?
You feel that it is your own.
No, supposing I meet him on the road and inside I'm saying I have a dislike, so I'm saying where I met this person. Saware saware nu modu kyan joyu, right? What we say in Gujarati. But outside I say, hello, how are you? Good morning. Which sanskar am I giving myself? Am I giving myself a sanskar of hello, how are you? Or am I giving myself a sanskar of I don't like you? Dvesh. Dvesh. Can you understand? Right? So each moment, what I'm giving to the mind, that is sanskar. Now I remember that she owes me money. But where do I remember? I'm having a bath in the bathroom. Right? She's not there in front of me. I'm having a bath in the bathroom, but now I'm thinking that she did this, she that. So I'm giving myself the sanskar of dvesh. Can you understand the of hatred? Can you? Now, this is something which we must think upon, because I may go to give a donation to somebody, to some school, right? But inside, I'm getting a feeling of what a good boy am I. I'm giving a donation. So, which sanskar is the donation sanskar coming, or is it the what a good boy am I? Can you understand? Where does the karma come from? Does it come from the outer action or the inner action? Inner action forms the karma. You see, I'm planting a seed of ego. I may be giving a big donation outside, but I'm planting a seed of ego because I'm living that ego inside. I'm giving myself the sanskar of ego. So this we must understand each moment. What impression am I giving myself in each moment? Right? And can I be free of impressions of dislike? Is it possible to be free of impressions of dislike? And it takes hard work. It takes hard work to come to a state. In life, we should come to a state where we have preferences, but we don't have any objection, right? I prefer cabbage to brinjal, but I have no objection to brinjal, right? So there is no dislike. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? So there are preferences, right? So we have preferences today that I like more chili in my food, but if there is bland food, I will enjoy the bland food also. There's no objection to bland food. Can you understand what I'm saying? So for any spiritual practitioner, he has to come to a state where there is no objection of anything in his life. He does not object to anything in his life. He comes to a state, I prefer not to eat this, but right? Or I prefer to wear these kind of clothes. But if somebody wants to wear a trouser with one side long and one side short, I have no objection to it, right? So, no.
Acceptance, basically.
Basically acceptance. But acceptance is always in the present moment. Very difficult. Very difficult. Because if she's taken my money, take it in another way. Acceptance is always of the fact. Always of the fact. It's a long journey from the fact to the truth. Right? She has taken my money is a fact. Acceptance is of the fact. Now, if I accept that fact, then maybe I can make a journey from the fact to the truth. And I realize that all money comes from some central bank, right? I use it for some time. I'm a trustee of that money. There's nothing like my money. Where can I say that she has taken my money? But that is from the fact I have moved to the truth. But if I don't accept the fact, I cannot move to the truth. Can you get it? So acceptance is the first step, but always in the present moment. It's very difficult to accept facts. Sometimes facts of life can be very, very cruel. And to build acceptance there is sometimes very difficult. Right? Bolo. So tomorrow, what do we want to do? The technique has come. Pause. Tomorrow, shall we talk of the law of the pendulum? The law of the pendulum. How many pendulums we have inside, and everything is swinging from one place to the other place, right? We'll talk of the law of the pendulum tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Jai Shri Krishna. Good night.